Welcome, everybody. It's wonderful to have you here with us this morning in the Tempest Anderson Hall for the opening event of the York Festival of Ideas. My name's Karen Bloor. I'm a professor in health economics and policy at the University of York. I'll be chairing the event today, and it's a great pleasure to welcome you all. So it's my great pleasure to introduce our speaker, Dr. Sian Williams. Sian is an award-winning broadcast journalist, a chartered counselling psychologist. She spent years counselling those living with anxiety, both in the NHS and privately, and has worked with media organisations, governments and businesses to help prevent staff burnout. She's also, of course, one of Britain's most trusted broadcasters, having spent 4 decades in TV and radio, including 11 years hosting BBC Breakfast. And she now presents BBC 4's Life Changing and BBC Radio 3 Unwind. Her latest book, at the front here, is The Power of Anxiety, How to Ride the Worry Wave. And this book's going to be our main topic of discussion today. So Sian looks in this book at anxiety quite differently. Rather than squaring up to anxiety, we should listen to what it's saying. And we're all looking forward to hearing more from her. So the format of the session is going to be a conversation initially between me and Sian, and then we'll open it up to questions from any of you. So Sian, thank you for joining us.
It's such a pleasure to be here, and I think we both had a bit of an anxious moment back there, because I thought it was a question and answer session, and you thought it was a 40-minute talk that I was delivering. So we...
Double anxiety there.
Well, and we had 10 minutes. We're going to sort this out. It's all going to be fine. And then there was another one which I didn't know I was opening. So thank you so much it's such a joy to be here on such a glorious day in such an amazing city. Very, very pleased to be here. And of course, you worry that people won't turn up. And you said it's sold out, and I thought, well, that's lovely, but it's a nice day. What if people don't come? And it reminded me of when I published my first book, which is just over 10 years ago. We were in Oxford, in a university college, and it was a Sunday morning, Mother's Day, and the clocks had gone back. It was 9 o'clock in the morning, and I remember looking out into no audience apart from my family, and our little 6-year-old daughter looked around and said, "Mummy, is it just us?" So the fact that you're all here, I couldn't be more thankful. Thank you very much.
There you go, that's one worry to tick off the list. So Sian, the book's called The Power of Anxiety, and so anxiety does clearly have power. Could you explain that to us? What do you mean?
Yes, so the reason I called it The Power of Anxiety is that anxiety can have a power over the way we think about ourselves, the way we engage with other people and the rest of the world. Anxiety has a huge power. And sometimes we can use that, and we can use it in positive ways, because anxiety is a clinical necessity. We need anxiety. We don't want to get rid of anxiety. And even though it often feels like that, if it's sort of gripping you, you just think, I want rid of this. And I understand that. I've been there, where you go somewhere and perhaps you sit in front of someone and say, right, I want this gone. What do I need to do to get rid of it? But the more you fight anxiety, the more you struggle with it, the bigger it becomes. It becomes even more powerful. And anyone who has tried to do that, who's run away from anxiety, who's struggled with it, who's fought it, it just overwhelms them. It's like a tug of war with a monster. The monster grows bigger and pulls you in. So my whole philosophy on anxiety is we need it. There's a knocking in the car, we need to get that sorted. If there's something going on in our relationship and it's sort of making us feel anxious, we need to look at it. Those bits of anxiety we need. What the problem with anxiety is if it overwhelms everything in life. So we need to look at when is it helpful and when is it harmful. And then if it's being harmful, we need to find ways that we can use it to best effect, to use it to make our lives a little bit better. So we acknowledge it, it's there, It's probably not going to go away. I'm 61. I still have anxiety. I had it when I was 6 and probably earlier. I was a born worrier, I was told. Too sensitive, need to grow a thicker skin, will never be a journalist. There was a line in my school report that said, Sian Williams is a small girl with thin powers of concentration who tries hard and is keen to please. And I think I've always been that sort of worrying, sensitive, people-pleasing person. You know, I'm still that probably now, but I think I've learnt to live with it and use some of it, use that sensitivity in a way that I think has made me a better journalist and a better psychologist. And I believe that everybody here who has experienced anxiety will know that there is something within it that they can listen to, and then they can use it to best effect so that they can be the person they want to be and live the life they want to live.
Fabulous, thank you. Now, in your book, you made an analogy that I really liked, which was about dandelions and orchids.
Yes.
Sounds as if you're an orchid to me, but I wonder if you could explain the metaphor to us all.
It's a lovely, lovely metaphor that comes from a paediatrician called W. Thomas Boyce, and he came up with it many, many years ago. But he said that broadly he felt children fell into 2 categories. You had your sort of hardy, resilient dandelions, you know, the flowers that poke up through cracks in the pavement, and in dry weather they're still there, and you mow the garden and they're still there. And then you have your orchids, who are magnificent in the right circumstances and the right environment, but in the wrong environment they will wilt. And orchids are wonderful, but also very sensitive to their environment. And he thought children broadly fell into these categories. Subsequently, that they came up with the tulips, who sit in the middle. So that's a little bit of both. So, but we know that sensitivity, high sensitivity, so the orchids of the world, there are about 30% of us, I say us because I think there'll be some highly sensitive people in the room. If you've come to a talk on anxiety, I might be wrong, but people who've been perhaps told that or felt that everybody else knows how to do this stuff, and I just feel like everything is affecting me, like all my nerve endings are on the outside, or you know, that fear of, we all have a fear of rejection and all those sorts of things. But I do think there is something about these orchids that mean that they are brilliant, they are more empathic, they are more intuitive, they are more artistic and creative, which suits the York Festival of Ideas. There'll be loads of orchids in York today. And that is incredibly powerful. But they are also more prone, all the research suggests, to anxiety and depression. Because they will be affected by the negative, but also affected by the positive. So it's right, how do we help our orchids to thrive? What do we need to do to make sure that they can really tap into the things that benefit them and other people? And that's about looking after their mental health. There are things that benefit anyone with anxiety, but going into nature. Talk
us through some of those. I mean, particularly given that we were talking about children. How do we help our orchid child to thrive?
Yes, and it's orchid adults, and it's orchid pets. Who's got a sensitive pet? Yes. Who thinks they might be a bit of an orchid? You see, so if orchids are 30%, we've got more than 30% in this room. There is a quiz in there, by the way, that you can do to test your sensitivity, to see whether you're more. I'm more emotionally reactive, so I can cry very easily if somebody, which is not always helpful in a therapy room, but I've learnt that. Or as a journalist, I've just sort of learnt that. But, you know, there are various, you might be more environmentally sensitive, so you might be more emotionally sensitive. So there's a quiz there. But yes, there are definitely things you can do to look after yourself. Early morning light, for example,
that's good.
Affects the cortisol levels. When we wake up, we have something called the early morning cortisol awakening response. that means our cortisol or a stress hormone is high. It needs to be high because it's like, right, let's crack on with the day.
Yeah.
But what we need, and I realise I'm talking to somebody from the University of York, you probably know this, but that our cortisol needs to be variable throughout the day to cope with the stuff that life throws at us. Mm-hmm. If we go to our mobiles first thing, which many of us do, or we don't get out, or we don't see light, what happens is our cortisol goes up and it stays up. So it's high and flat. And I've done a series of experiments that if you have high, flat cortisol, you are less likely to be able to use your brain effectively throughout the day, but also sort of up until the afternoon. Okay. And it will affect your sleep. So early morning light affects not only our circadian rhythms, but also our cortisol, our stress response. Okay. Have a good cry. Crying releases cortisol. Anybody realise that in tears, you're actually excreting stress hormone? That's why we cry.
Did not know that.
So I would say get out into the light. Don't worry about a few tears. Nature. I mean, these are good for all people who have anxiety, but most particularly for very sensitive people. There's a brilliant experiment where people who were recovering from surgery who saw some green outside their hospital window were more likely to recover faster. But they've done lots of experiments about the impact of nature on levels of anxiety and sensitivity, the impact of craft, music, creativity, going to things that really support your mental well-being, where you can process difficult stuff without thinking of it actively, you know, when you're engaged in a task, that really helps. And developing self-compassion. A lot of us have a really strong self-critical voice. Yeah. We're very good at beating ourselves up. And there's a reason why we do that, a sort of evolutionary reason, is that we have to look for the negative. Oh, that looks dangerous, or that's a frightening situation. I'm going to be on high alert. But sometimes it's not particularly helpful. So we need to listen to that self-critical voice, thank it, because it's only looking out for us. It's only saying, I'm doing something to keep you safe, and say, but in this instance, you can take a back seat. Yeah, okay, that's good. So nature, light, sounds like we need dogs to me. I think. Well, I'm a bit of a fan of a dog.
I'm a fan of a dog.
Do you know that a walk with a dog is better for your mental well-being than a walk without one?
There you go.
That's what some of the research suggests. So there we go. If there are any dog lovers here.
Very good. Plenty,
but yes, and as I say, you know, pets can be highly sensitive too. But yes, you know, very sensitive people are more likely to be empathic towards animals as well. Okay. So yeah.
Do you think we stay, if we're an orchid child, do we stay an orchid throughout, or do you become
really
more dandelion?
Question.
I feel like I've become more of a dandelion.
Yeah, and you may well have done, because the heritability of sensitivity is around 50%. So there is a gene marker for, but it's very complex. But recently we've discovered a gene marker for sensitivity. But yeah, the heritability of sensitivity is about 50%. But that means 50% is your environment. And that means you can adapt it and change it. Anyone who's worked in a workplace that feels quite toxic, for example, some nods around the room, or have worked with people who they don't get on with, will know that they need to bring stuff into their day if they can't get out of that environment in order to best support them. But yes, I think there is a way of moving if you choose to. I would say recognise those bits of an orchid, though, that will always benefit you. I believe that sort of that compassion, that empathy, that intuitiveness, deep processing. You know, the sensitive, highly sensitive people process things more deeply. That is why they can tend to overthink. Because they go very deep, they can go round and round, and it can be that the thinking turns into ruminating and catastrophizing. Yeah. But anxiety as a whole is not just a head thing. A lot of people say it's just about worry, and it isn't. It's felt in the body. Anyone who has gone through a feeling of anxiety will, I'm sure, have felt it somewhere. In a tight stomach, when we're in a highly threatened situation, or we feel threatened or in danger, and our anxiety levels are high, our digestion shuts down because the body says, well, we don't need this at the moment. If we're escaping from something, we don't need to digest. We just need to run or faint or freeze or do whatever. So we're absolutely very much on high alert and our body reacts. There's a cortisol, there's adrenaline, there's all sorts of things going on. Yeah. People who are anxious are more likely to have problems with their immune system. Inflammatory markers go up. Digestion, more likely to experience IBS. So this is why I'm thinking, right, well, how then do we live with it well? How do we notice all that stuff and go with it and say, what do I need to bring into my life here? The tips and tools and help, that hopefully you'll find in the book that will best support me so that I feel I've got some of this power back. And it shows up in behaviour as well, anxiety. If ever a work event has come up or a social event has come up and you think, oh, I'm not going to that. No, I don't want to go to that. Withdrawal and avoidance feels a lot easier when anxiety is high. When anxiety is around, our body and brain go, yeah, it's safer to stay in. Safer not to go. And that's when we don't go temporarily. Of course it feels safer, but what happens is behaviourally, we learn that this might be a coping strategy, but in the long run, we're not flexing that social muscle. We're not getting out and connecting with people. We're not engaging our curiosity, and that can make anxiety worse. So I work with people who have either experienced trauma, which has led to anxiety, so maybe agoraphobia or panic, and that has shown up in not just their relationships and their engagement with the world, but just, being flat, a lack of joy, not going out. Some of the people I work with emergency responders in the NHS. I've been doing that for the past 4 years. And a lot of them were at the Grenfell Tower fire. And the ones I work with have trauma symptoms which result in panic and result in things like agoraphobia, so not going out. And our work together is enabling them to re-engage with the world, to hear that narrative that's coming up, which is, I can't walk down the stairs, or I can't go into that narrow, confined space, or I'm smelling something and it's, it's reminding me of the smell. Smell goes straight to the limbic system, which is why it's the first thing often that our body registers that makes us think there's danger here, and then the whole of their body goes into a shutdown. And the work I do with them, which I'm incredibly privileged to do, is ways to start living with that well and start having the life that they deserve to have. And some of that stuff is in there as well, like working with panic. Panic is a frightening thing. We think we might have a heart attack or throw up or embarrass ourselves, or it's scary stuff, panic. And of course, the more we worry about the panic, the more we panic. It's sort of like meta panic and meta anxiety. And I think it's about just bringing a compassion in, but it can be so hard to bring that self-compassion in when you are blaming yourself all the time for not doing stuff, for not recovering well. So that's some of the work I do, and some of that is in there.
And you were at Grenfell reporting.
I was, I was, yeah. When I was reporting, it was I did a lot of reporting on disaster areas and zones and tragedies and things when I first started. First started at the BBC in 1986 on a training scheme with Clive Myrie, who's going to be here a bit later.
Too, isn't he?
Yes, and the first thing I remember was the Hillsborough disaster, which was that stadium disaster between Liverpool and Sheffield, and it killed 79 people, and it was just, it's just the most horrendous thing. And I think that was when I first became aware of the importance of managing somebody's shock, grief, and distress. And I was 21. So I was aware that I needed to handle it well, but I wasn't quite sure how best to do that then. I hope I handled it well, but then subsequently going to all these other disaster zones and reporting on tragedies, which is the nature of news. You're with people for their worst ever bit of their life, usually. Yeah. So how do you make sure that you allow their voice to be heard in a sensitive and compassionate and respectful way? I trained to be a trauma assessor at the BBC to help my colleagues as well, who were coming back from this stuff and didn't know what to do with all the guilt, because they go back to their nice, comfortable homes and they leave. I remember in Pakistan, I reported on the Kashmir earthquake there, where thousands of people died, tens of thousands of people died. And I remember I was doing the 1 o'clock news, and I was looking at the camera and doing reading the news, or at least letting people know what was happening. I was right at the epicenter of the earthquake, and I could hear some stuff going on behind me, and I didn't know what it was because I was obviously facing the camera. And there were shouts, and then when I finished the broadcast, I turned round, and there were these 3 lads hauling their mother out of the rubble.
Oh my goodness.
And I thought, gosh, the audience saw that.
Wow.
And I felt, I went home with this profound sense of guilt for getting too close, I guess, you know? I can hear that. Okay, I think it's important to register when there's emotion around, but I could really feel it. Yeah. And then when my husband asked me what was going on, I couldn't tell him. I couldn't tell him. And I noticed so many of my colleagues coming back from difficult stuff, not able to process what they had seen, and feeling guilt. We know that guilt makes post-traumatic stress disorder worse. It compounds it, it deepens it. And that's when I first started working with my fellow colleagues in journalism, and then I did a science master's in psychology to understand what's going on in the brain. A lot of people think, in the same way with anxiety, that it's their fault. It is not your fault. You are not disordered. You are not defective. And that's so important for people to understand. It is just your body and your brain and your behavior doing that thing. You know, I couldn't talk about it with my husband, who's here, because I knew I had to go on to the breakfast sofa when I got home the following day and do an interview with probably Daniel O'Donnell, who seemed to turn up every 5 minutes. But I knew I needed to get myself in a different headspace. You know, so you kind of like, and I think anyone who's experienced loss, grief, trauma, has grown up with a difficult childhood, any of that stuff, it feels so much easier to box it up and put it at the back of our head and go, well, I don't need to open that. I don't need to look in there. And we absolutely know that the lid of that box is going to start going like this before it pops open and it all comes out, and you haven't developed the coping skills to manage. I say, learn the coping skills when you're well, because when you're not emotionally well, it's much harder to access them. So I did the masters, and then I was still news reading. I was still doing the BBC at that time. And then I got cancer, which sort of got in the way of as it tends to. It's so inconvenient. It comes up when you least expect it, and then throws everything up in the air. And then I did a professional doctorate in counselling psychology, where I was with patients in the NHS. I worked in family trauma for a while. And that's when I thought, I just love this. I mean, what an honour to be sitting alongside someone in the unknowing of it. You know, there is unknowing. I am still unknowing. Just because I've written a book doesn't mean I'm, the expert of everything.
Seems like you know.
Well, but we are all unknowing. You know, even when I'm a therapist, I'm unknowing. We're discovering together. And that's why there's a lot of stuff in this book about understanding yourself better before you start putting in the tools or collecting the tools or putting the stuff in your backpack, whatever metaphor you want to use, that will help you get on with your life. Understand yourself first, know where it's coming from, know what it's trying to tell you.
Okay. So I've heard some of your life-changing programs. What a great program that is.
Yes, thank you very much. Anybody here a life-changing listener? Do you listen to live? Thank you very much. It's an absolute
if you
gift.
haven't heard it, please tune in. You can get it on BBC Sounds or any of those things.
Oh, it's lovely. It's about key moments that transform lives, really, and just that moment where you look back on it and reflect on it differently, and it's very inspiring, isn't it? The people I talk to,
yeah, amazing. So I was wondering if there was one of those for you in your change. Is it more of a transition from broadcast journalism to counselling, or did you have one of those life-changing moments?
That's a really good question. I think there are a number of life-changing moments.
Mm-hmm.
I think one of the things that took me into psychology was we had a son who was born blue and flat, so sadly had no oxygen and had to be revived, and luckily was. But we knew his brain was going to be a little bit different, and he had fits for the first 4 years of his life. He's amazing. He's at university. He's doing really well, and his brain also works differently. There's neurodiversity in my family as well. You know, there are differences in my family that I wanted to understand to help equip them.
Yeah.
And I talk about autism and neurodiversity a bit in the book. I wanted to equip them with the tools that they needed to live life well. But when I was also an emergency, I lost half my blood very quick, so 4.5 pints of blood went very quickly. So I was in emergency surgery. He was being revived. We didn't connect for some time. He was not of this world for some time. So I think that was a life-changing moment for me, because I wanted to know how we both could survive well.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things that took me into psychology, which has changed my life. But there have been loads of them. You know, there have been sort of, you know, little moments that help. They might not be life-changing, but little moments that help you understand yourself better. So one of the things one of the stories in the book, there are little moments of sort of where perhaps my stress overwhelms my resources to cope, which is sometimes just what anxiety is. We don't choose, by the way, our threat, our fight, flight, freeze, faint, acquiesce response when something shows up. And although the people I deal with have very high levels of anxiety and often trauma, and mine is not quite the same, I was quite early on in my presenting career. I was hosting the opening of the Princess Diana Memorial Fountain. Yes, nods in the room. Do you remember that? 2003, I think it might have been. And it was the first time that the Spencer family and the Windsor had come together since Diana's funeral.
Right.
Big thing.
Yeah.
And I was hosting for the BBC. Big thing. And I was sitting on a very high bar stool in a marquee with a well, it wasn't really a marquee, but there was just a bit of a top of a tent. It was very hot. I hadn't eaten that day. We were waiting and waiting and waiting and waiting for something to happen. I had to commentate over the pictures, which I could see on a small screen by my feet. And I was commentating quite happily in the car in that sort of BBC voice, you know, and the Royals car has just turned into that sort of thing. And then all of a sudden, the pictures on the little screen by my feet went black. So I couldn't see what I was meant to be commentating about, but the audience could see the pictures.
Right.
They're watching the pictures. I can't see the pictures. I'm the one that's got to commentate over them. And my body just went, well, we need to get out of here really quickly. So on this very high bar stool, I fell off. Onto the floor.
Oh, my goodness.
Luckily, Nick Witchell, who was the Royal correspondent at the time, picked up seamlessly. The director said, right, Nick, over to you. He was down by the actual fountain. And he picked up and did his job beautifully, as he always does. I contacted him actually for this book and said, did you realise that's what happened? He had no idea. But after I'd fallen onto the floor, my producer, in a typical BBC way, rushed up to me with 3 custard cream biscuits, said, eat those, get back on the stool. So I had the biscuits, I was on the stool, ready to go. Here we are. But that sort of, that faint reaction is my reaction to either faint or freeze tends to be my trauma reaction. And I think, you know, there are little things that make you think, I need to know what's going on here. I need to know why my brain's doing this thing. I should have eaten. Yeah. That's it. I shouldn't have been on the high stool. It was a very hot day, etc., etc. So there are lots of things that played into it. Yeah. You know, another anxiety-inducing time was when I've met the Queen, because I'm just thinking about the royals now. I've met the Queen, the former Queen, the late Queen, sorry, twice. Once when she was opening new broadcasting house, when I was doing a programme, and she was coming into my studio to do the programme with me, but you're not allowed to interview, or then, you weren't allowed to interview the Queen. Okay. So I was told quite strictly not to ask her any questions. She would come in and sit down in the chair. We had to get a special chair, by the way, one that didn't move, because all the studio chairs have casters on. And can you imagine the Queen sitting on a chair and going, So I was already quite anxious about that, but we managed to get a chair that didn't move. I was thinking, don't ask the Queen anything, don't ask the Queen anything. I had to go to loads and loads of protocol meetings, which you do at the BBC, about how to greet the Queen. So when she first comes into the studio, we were going to go to a tape so that I could get up and greet the Queen. You know, Ma'am, is it Ma'am? Does it rhyme with ham? Is it Ma'am? Is it ham? Is it
jam? Not marmalade.
Jam? Is it what is it?
Yeah.
So you've got that going on as well. But all these protocol meetings were about how you greet the Queen. Well, I must have been to half a dozen. I'm sure I remember being told, you nod, and then another one I was told, you curtsy, and then another one I was told, you do a sort of half bow. The Queen comes in, I'm like this. I'm not knowing my hand's out, my brain's going, don't ask her anything, don't ask, is it ma'am, is it jam, is it, what is it? It was just, and then I've got to go on and present a programme, so you sort of show Her Majesty to her seat and carry on with the programme, and then she delivers her speech to the nation about the opening of Broadcasting House. And then I met her subsequently a couple of years ago. She asked me to, I say she, her people asked me to do a speech to the Women's Institute in Sandringham in Norfolk. Okay. Sorry, this isn't about the book at all, is it? I might as well tell you a few anxiety-inducing experiences. And I said, WI, Norfolk, that's a long way to go. We live in Kent. I just started a new job, la, la, la. And they said, you might want to come. Our president is the Queen. So I'm there. And then I'm thinking, what am I going to say? I've got to do a talk to the Queen. What am I going to say? We go to this little village hall in Sandringham. And there are, it's private, so there are only lovely ladies from the WI, and some cakes on the table, and best magnet competition on the other table, which the Queen did judge, believe it or not. So it's all set up, and then I've got to deliver this speech. And actually, the Queen was the first one, really, first woman to properly broadcast on the BBC. If you think about it, because she was only 16 when she first broadcast on the BBC. So I thought, I'll do something like that. The Queen was sitting closer, madam, than you are to me now. Can you imagine? I'm doing a speech about the Queen with her sitting there like this. Oh, my heart was just, that thing about, and that is in the book, notice what's going on. Oh, there's my heart. Whoa, there's my... Okay, slow things down, take a breath, take a moment. And it was lovely, and she was lovely, and very funny, actually. She delivered a speech, and she was a wonderful person. So, but yes, there will be moments in all our life, performance anxiety, I'm thinking, social anxiety, that imposter syndrome all the time. Imposter syndrome, that was developed or thought up by two female doctors, Clance and Immis, and they're in the 70s, and they thought it was so ubiquitous that it should be called the imposter experience. Because we all have moments when we think, why is Sian Williams, a small girl with thin powers of concentration who tries hard and is keen to please, standing in front of Her Majesty, talking to her? We all have moments like that. We think, I shouldn't be here, what am I doing? And it can very much stop our engagement with the world. And it's easier to say, I'm not going to do it. It's just too worrying. And there's a story in there about Philip Selway, who's the drummer of a band called Radiohead, who I was a big fan of, who he used to play to huge stadia, and for a whole year, he didn't know how to connect with the drums. His performance anxiety became so high, he couldn't really engage with, and that got in the way, and he learned to say that, you know, when the gremlins are around, which that's what he calls them,
right.
he sort of utilises them in a different way.
Okay.
He uses them as a fuel to fuel his performance. And he's dialed down the perfectionism.
That's good.
You know, perfectionism is huge, especially in younger people, and that stops people doing things.
Yeah.
They either procrastinate or they work to burn out, and neither's good.
Yeah, okay. I think, I mean, the book's such a great mix of really great stories, which we're getting an impression of today, and practical tips you know, I love the little tests that we can give ourselves and that kind of thing.
Yeah, that's about the understanding and the knowing. Yeah,
absolutely. I just wondered if there's anything we could share with the audience. Do you have any tips or any exercises we could do together this morning?
Is anybody up for an exercise? Just one we can all do together. I often think that with things like anxiety, panic, however it shows up with you, we might say, or you might hear people going, you know, go straight to the breath, you know, just slow down your breathing. It can be really hard to do that if you're panicking, because you're already hyperventilating, you're breathing really quickly, and so the breath already feels frightening. So what I tend to do before we do the breathing exercise, if there is a lot of anxiety, is a grounding exercise called 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, which is 5 things you can see. So I can see the lights, I can see the audience, I can see the lectern, I can see you, you know, I can see the books on the table, which I'll be signing later. And then 4 things you can hear, 3 things you can touch, 2 things you can taste, 1 thing you can smell. So, and if not all those senses are accessible to you, you can do 4. It doesn't really matter. But it's just a way of grounding you in the space. So what I would like to do now is to just, we're not going to do that whole exercise, but we are just going to be aware of where we are in the room. We are here in the present, we're with everybody else, we're enjoying this moment of connection and curiosity, and just look around you, look at the other people who are here, maybe just sort of loosen your shoulders a little bit, see if there's any tension that you've been holding and storing. Give your arms a little wiggle. Feel where you're connecting with the chair. And then what I'd like you to do, if you can do it, is uncross your legs and just put your feet right on the floor so that you can feel the ground beneath your feet. And perhaps close your eyes if you're willing to do that. Close your eyes. You can feel your feet on the floor. You can feel where your body connects with the chair. You can hear a few distant noises. Your thoughts are telling you, why is she doing this? And let them come and go. Just be aware of the stuff that comes in, but don't hold on to it tightly. We don't need to hold on to it tightly. Feel the air on your skin. Feel your feet on the floor. Feel your body connecting with the chair. And then I'd like us to do a really simple breathing exercise. So if you'd like to, I'd like you to breathe in for 4. And then hold for 4. Breathe out for 4. And hold for 4. And just continue to do that for a while, as long as it feels comfortable. Be aware if you're holding any tension in your stomach, and just soften the edges of it. Let that breath smooth the edges of it. As you keep doing this exercise, your thoughts will just be doing the thing that thoughts do, be telling you there's noise outside, or is everybody else doing this, or is it just me? Just see them come and go, those thoughts. We're not pinning them to our brain. We're just concentrating on that breath. Slowing things down. Loosening things up. Letting that breath really soothe and nurture our body to prepare us for whatever the day has to offer. And then, once you're ready, open your eyes, come back into the room, notice how you're feeling. Is anybody feeling any differently? Yeah? Anybody feeling a little calmer? You've all gone very quiet. So either you've gone off to sleep and you're not actually opening your eyes. What slowing the breath down does and concentrating on the breath does, it stimulates something called the parasympathetic system, which is our rest and digest system. And when we're on high alert, our autonomic nervous system, which is given that word because it's sort of automatic, it sort of dials that down and then brings up a different way of being, just where we feel a lot more relaxed. And when we're in that kind of state, anxiety just gets a little bit quieter, doesn't have the power and the energy that it sometimes does over us. So there are lots of breathing exercises in there. There are values exercises in there. There are things that hopefully you'll find useful that will help you engage with the world a little differently if anxiety is around, which it often is for many of us.
Thank you, Sian. Now, I've got through about probably a tenth of the questions that I had, even though we only had 15 minutes to put them together.
Less,
but
yeah.
I could go on all day, but let's give you a chance. So Sian's happy to take questions from anybody. Do we have a microphone? So there's a person just over here. Let's start with you, please.
Hi, my name is Suki.
Hi, Suki.
I'm interested in your thoughts about the medicalisation of things like anxiety and how that sort of sits in with your kind of philosophy and thinking of managing anxiety.
Thank you, Suki. That's a really good question. What I would say about drugs and medicalisation is that it can help get people into therapy. So it can help people access therapy if they are managing their condition with medication. So it can work very effectively with therapy. There are other things, if you don't want to take medication, that can be just as effective. We'd obviously know talking therapies are incredibly effective, which is why I'm in them. But also, 3 hours of yoga 3 times a week is as good as a lot of anxiety medication. That's what the studies say. We know that some medications lose their efficacy, so they become less effective. So I'm not against medication because I don't want to be blaming of anyone who is doing what they can to get through their day. There is, as I say, anxiety is not your fault. You are also not defective or disordered. The manual that a lot of psychologists work from is called the DSM-5, and it's got loads of different categories of disorder in it. And the number of anxiety disorders has grown quite considerably. Now, I don't work from a disordered perspective. I'm not what's wrong with you. I'm more about what has happened to you and what did you do to keep yourself safe, and now how can we get you back doing what you want to do. So for me, it doesn't really matter what the disorder is or what the label is. We still have to engage with the world in a different kind of way. So, and that's a very individual perspective. I'm not a psychiatrist. I wasn't trained medically as a doctor. I'm a psychologist, and my belief system is a little bit different to that. But yes, I hope that's helpful. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. Any more questions? Just there, just halfway up on the inside.
Yes, got it. Hello.
Yeah. Can you just wait for the mic?
Oh, yes.
Sorry, is that all right? She's just coming that way.
Hello, can you hear me now?
I can.
Yes.
Hi.
Lovely. Great talk. Thank you very much. Great
Thank
to see you. We're from a family of neurodiversity, and we've had quite a bit of trauma in our lives and things. My daughter is coming up 14 and has a lot of health anxiety, and I just wondered if you had any tips for helping her with that. Like she's saw her dad have a heart attack, and
How old is your daughter? Can I ask?
She'll be 14 next
14.
month. Yeah.
14. So you have a 14-year-old daughter and neurodiversity in the family as well, and there's health anxiety around. Yeah, interesting. I think we can get into a pattern of unproductive worrying. And I think sometimes, let's tackle the two things separately, even though there might be a crossover, and I don't know you and your family, and I wouldn't want to get into areas that you're not comfortable to go in. But often with health anxiety, the highly sensitive have more what is called interoception. Interoception is where we do feel everything that's going on in our body. What we can tend to do is overanalyze it and think that it's something wrong when it's not wrong. It's why my heart's beating faster, I must be having a heart attack. Or so we overthink the physical manifestation of anxiety, and that can absolutely turn into health anxiety. And sometimes we want answers to things, don't we? We want sort of, why do I feel this way? It must be something that's physically wrong with me. And if I sort that, and of course it might be, but if I sort this one thing out, then it'll all go away. And typically, if you get into a pattern of unproductive worrying, what might happen is you might tackle that one health thing, but then another one might come up, and then another one might come up. And it might be a sort of manifestation of not an inability to be with something uncomfortable, and highly sensitive people are more likely to experience health anxiety, but just a sort of an unknowing. And perhaps if there is a greater knowing of oneself and what comes up, and dialing down the inner critic and the threat response, and here it is again, here's that anxiety telling me I've got to go and visit the doctor again. If there is a physical cause, that's absolutely fine. We need to sort that. But I would say just be aware of when the health anxiety is perhaps tied to high levels of sensitivity and that overthinking the bodily responses. Does that make sense? It does. I also think, just because you mentioned neurodiversity, and I work with quite a lot of people who are neurodiverse. I work with autistic clients and clients with ADHD. We know that girls tend to mask. And there's a brilliant book by Gina Ripp, and I interviewed Gina for the book because there is a section, autism and social anxiety, for example, or health anxiety, might look a little different. She's written a book called The Lost Girls of Autism, which is great. But if you have spent all your life trying to fit in to a world that doesn't accept and embrace you, that is why your levels of threat will be high, because all the time you'll be thinking, what do I need to do to stay safe? What does this person need me to be? And that's why, and that's a profoundly difficult and exhausting place to be. And that is why we need more help for people with neurodiversity, because they shouldn't have to fit in to a so-called neurotypical world. We should be making an effort to make the world a place where they can safely be themselves and live. That's my view.
Thank you, Sian. Okay, let's go over here, and there's two questions just down here.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi. I just wanted to sort of ask an opinion in terms of, in the last decade or so, the anxiety therapy that is offered in the NHS is often group or skill-based before it is individual-based, so level 2, 3, and so on. And you mentioned quite rightly so that when you're doing therapy, you ask where they are feeling that anxiety, how they're feeling it, and the journey. What's your opinion about doing first the skills, and then sort of after they've gone through group or leaflets or skill group, then possibly recommending therapy?
Do you mean, what's my view about group therapy, or what's my group about...
Skills before individual So what's happening is that people get offered skill groups or skill-based therapy, which means you learn deep breathing, you learn mindfulness before exploring their individual type of therapy on a one-to-one basis.
Okay, so that's a good question. I think and forgive me if I'm getting this wrong, but what you're saying is, what's my view on giving people the skills before they truly understand what is going on with them. That is why this has been written. Understand yourself first, then you can... Not all skills are going to be appropriate for every person. I mean, there will be a lot of skills which we can all use, of course, but just as there are many different therapies, you know, I was trained in cognitive behavioral therapy and psychodynamic therapy and person-centered therapy and all these sorts of different things, and I work integratively, which means a bit of this, bit of that, bit of the other. So I work with something called acceptance and commitment therapy and compassion-focused therapy. I'm a big believer. I work with people with cancer, or I did for 2 years, where there's a lot of self-criticism. And therefore compassion-focused approach is much better. But I think, yes, understanding yourself first and knowing what's going on with you and where it might have come from, and where that inner voice might have come from. Is it yours? Is it somebody else's? What's it saying to you? Mm-hmm. Before you then learn the things that will best support you. Mm. Yeah? And I'm not against group therapy, by the way, because I think a group space, and that's perhaps, it's hard to get therapy at the moment. There aren't enough psychologists or therapists or counsellors, and we need many, many more of them. And, you know, there's meant to be parity between physical and mental health services, and there isn't. And the waiting lists are, you know, for getting somebody help are not good. But yes, I would say if you can sort of start to test those things out, start to understand yourself, and then you bring in your coping strategies. Try a few out. Not all of them will work, and see the ones that fit for you. But yeah, group therapy can also be good because it's a reflective space. Yeah, thank you.
There's a question just there, a little bit higher up.
Hi, I'm Matt. I'm just wondering, Sian, if they've got a health problem and they're really anxious about it, how do we overcome that in a way?
Do you have to?
If you have to overcome an illness and you're really anxious about it, how do we overcome it?
How do you overcome it? I think, thank you very much. What's your name? Was Matt? Oh, I met you earlier, didn't I? Yes. Yeah. In fact, did you say it's your birthday today?
Yes, it is.
Happy birthday, Matt. Thank you. Thanks for asking the question. I think you also said you were born on the day that I started presenting BBC Breakfast.
Yes, I was 2001. Yeah.
You're a breakfast baby.
Yes, a breakfast baby. I always love that show.
Yeah. Oh, so lovely to meet you. So what I would say, Matt, is if you have a condition that you're living with, we know that anxiety and pain come from the same areas of the brain. So a lot of people with anxiety will experience some level of pain. Often it shows up in the back, but it can be acute pain. But if you're living with a different... I'm not going to ask about your health condition. If you have another health condition that you are living with, understandably, the body is watching out for you. It's going, oh, okay, what's this new feeling, and do I need to get it checked out? And of course, occasionally you will. But when I work with people with cancer, and I published a paper academically on people living with cancer, some of them were palliative care, so they were getting lots of side effects from the treatment they were on. They weren't going to live much longer. How do you live well in that environment? And again, high levels of self-criticism. I'm not dealing with this properly. I should be doing something else. And very, very low levels of self-compassion. In fact, fears of self-compassion. Self-compassion means I'm weak. It means I won't be on guard. I need to be vigilant. You know, this threat level is really important. When we did an 8-week mindfulness course with a group of people who had were in various stages of various cancers, had very high levels of worrying, rumination, catastrophization, self-criticism to start with. By the end of the 8-week mindfulness course, where they did those simple breathing techniques, they did compassionate, reflective practice, so they thought about their experiences in a much kinder way. They were in a group, and actually that worked, because being able to share experiences is often really, really helpful. All those things came together, and by the end of the 8 weeks, their rumination was down, their fears of self-compassion were down, their self-criticism was down, and the way they were engaging with life and their self-compassion levels a lot higher. And that can be little things like some of them were doing mindful gardening, or, you know, just small things that they were weaving into their day, those coping strategies, weaving into their day on a regular basis to bring their threat level down, to get them engaging a little bit differently. So that's what I would suggest. Knowing those breaks and those moments and those ways of going into the rest and digest that will just dial down the threat brain and get you into a different state where your mind is not circling off like this. And you have to be compassionate when you're living with any kind of condition, health condition. You have to be. It's the only way to get through it. You know, there's a lovely quote from somebody who had prostate cancer. And he was a gentleman in his 70s, and he said, and he didn't have much longer, but he had a lovely line that he gave to me from a Mary Oliver poem. Mary Oliver is a beautiful poet, and it's from a poem called The Summer's Day, and he said this to me. He said, "Tell me, what is it you plan to do with your one wild and precious life? What is it you plan to do with your one wild and precious life?" Even when we're living with something really tough, even when that sort of a past trauma sometimes plays into the present, we're reminded of stuff that we're living with. You know, we all will suffer in some way. This is cheery, but we all will, you know. And we still have this wonderful, wild and precious life. And he knew that. So how am I going to live well with the time I have left? I felt he'd already accommodated himself to that. He was telling me, what are you going to do? So I thought, I'm going to stay doing what I'm going to stay in psychology, and I'm going to write a book.
Well, what a fantastic thing to do. And it's helping us all today. It's helping
I hope so.
many, many more people, I am sure.
Thank you.
It is, believe it or not, 11:59.
Oh, gosh.
And I can't believe how fast the hour has gone, to be honest.
Thank you.
But I think you've given us all many things to think about this morning.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
So thank you so much for the fascinating talk, for taking questions from the audience. I'd like to go
it's a
on,
lovely
but we're running up against time.
Yeah.
So thank you for answering our questions this
lovely.
morning.
And
We've
I'm going to be there
really
signing.
Enjoyed it. Yes,
And
that
if
was the
anybody
next
has
thing.
to leave, I'm going to sign some that will be in Fox's,
Fox Lane Books.
Fox Lane Books.
Yeah. So
a bit later, but I will
lots of books at the front here.
Come and have a chat and talk to me.
Come absolutely. Come and talk to Sian. Come and get her to sign your book. And highly recommended for all the really meaningful practical tips that you've offered us.
Thank you.
But thank you for sharing them with us today.
Thank you. Thanks for being very generous. Thank you, everybody. Thank you.